Hello, my name is Jim Boykin, and I'm the CEO of Internet Marketing Ninjas. And we have an exciting new product that can help out a lot of websites. And that exciting new product has to do with optimizing for core web vitals, doing things to make your site faster, the load time faster. You want to improve your Lighthouse scores, your Google Page Speed Insight scores. You want to convert more visitors and lose less visitors as well. And you may want to rank higher as well, and all these things can help out. And so we've created a wonderful new service that can help out a lot of you. And today we're going to talk about a lot of those services. I'm here with Detlef Johnson, who he's the one leading this project for Ninjas. And Detlef has been a technical SEO since 1995. So talk about knowing what you're doing. He knows, he has so much experience. He's written so much for ClickZ, for Search Engine Land, for other major places. I think just a few weeks ago, you gave a 2-hour training class at SMX on mobile load time and core web vitals and all of that as well. So as far as people in the industry that know their stuff about this, Detlef knows way more than I do. And we've kind of developed this service where we can help you. And Detlef is running a team where we have Ann Smarty on the team. We have Drew, our designer, who's been with us for 10 years, who specializes in load time speed. We have Adam and Jason and John. The three of those combined have like over 25 years experience at Ninjas. And I think just the names I've mentioned, I think me and Detlef, we added up a second ago, and it was 87 years combined experience with just the names that I've mentioned here. So these are some of the people that'll be we'll be working on a project where our goal is to make your site better, faster, score higher, lose less visitors, and maybe all of those things as well can help to increase your rankings in Google. You want to be faster than your competitors. So without further ado, Detlef, we should jump into what is this service that Jim talks about. Can you kind of explain a little bit about what it is that we're offering here?
Thanks, Jim. Yeah. So this is sort of a neat sort of SEO by proxy or SEO on the fly type of service, which we can now provide because of innovations in the marketplace. CDN, or content delivery network type of a business out there that allows us to open sort of a Swiss Army knife so that we can transform HTML on the fly going out to browsers that, people who are browsing your website. So in effect, we can make changes now in the cloud versus, requiring changes at the origin server or requiring changes that your web developers might need to take. So obviously this needs to be done carefully so that...
And if changes happen in the cloud, that's going to make things a lot faster as well. Can you explain how that, why is the cloud important to this?
Well, number one, your site will just automatically go faster by virtue of the CDN network itself, which is named Cloudflare. We're using them. And what that means is that cache copies of your website are hosted on the edge directly where users access the internet. So if your site is hosted in Seattle and someone from New York wants to get your website doesn't have to traverse all the way across the country, because Cloudflare has a server right in New York and can deliver a version of your site right there from cache. They're also offering us this ability to go in and edit things on the fly for you. Obviously, this is something that right now with Core Web Vitals update coming in May is something that I see is increasingly important.
Let's talk a little bit about Cloudflare for a moment, because you said just by virtue of having it there, your site is going to be faster. So it's almost step one with our process is we're going to recommend setting up a Cloudflare account, and you'll have to explain to me how you kind of connect to the website to Cloudflare, but this kind of duplicates it. Correct me if I'm wrong on this in the sense, and it makes it a lot faster just by setting up the Cloudflare account. Your site, just by virtue of having it there, if you're running Page Speed Insights or Google Lighthouse, you're instantly going to see improvements just from doing that step, correct?
a performance boost, you should be able to see it should go up a couple points at least, unless your host is as fast as Cloudflare, which isn't very likely.
What does that process mean? Like if I have a website and it's hosted, on my servers somewhere in Albany, New York, what does it mean to like get this Cloudflare account? What does that entail?
So in a nutshell, the way all of this stuff works is you might buy your domain at GoDaddy, and then you ultimately, if you stick with GoDaddy as your host, they set up a DNS setting to point to the GoDaddy server that hosts your website, which translates to an IP address, which is the address of that server. So what happens though, if you register at GoDaddy and maybe you host with another host, you might have a host provider, like I host with a company called Pair Networks, for example. They're in Pittsburgh and they're not GoDaddy. But if I bought a GoDaddy domain, I would need to change the name servers of that domain name to the name servers that Pair Networks provides if I'm hosting at Pair Networks. So that means
do I have to like FTP my site up to the cloud, or
yeah, if you've already done that, you've already set up your website, you don't need to do any additional FTP. The only step to get going with Cloudflare is to change your DNS settings to point to Cloudflare name servers instead of your host provider's name servers. And all you're doing is adding Cloudflare to the chain, because Cloudflare in turn goes back to your origin.
So it's not replacing your host. Your host and how you update your website stays the complete same.
Right.
We're now hooking it up here, which kind of stores copies of stuff. So when people call for your web pages, boom, 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 it's fast. Is that
exactly
correct?
because those requests don't have to go to your registrar. Like they already point at Cloudflare, and then any content that Cloudflare has cached from your site gets served immediately. So your site functions completely normally, just a little faster by virtue of Cloudflare's content
So
delivery.
is this something that you can set up if someone comes to us and they're like, hey, our site is hosted here. We really don't know how to set up the Cloudflare thing. Is that something you're like, hey, no problem. I'll set up the account. I'll get everything going. Here's your login stuff for the future. And is that kind of how that works?
Yeah, we have actually all of these options open to us. So if you want to set up your own Cloudflare account, you might already be using Cloudflare, for example. So in those cases, obviously, we don't need to set up anything for you, but we're here to help you out. Like if you don't have a Cloudflare account and you're unsure how to set things up, we can certainly do that for you. Now, the one thing that we rely on for this to work is that you do change your name servers over to point to Cloudflare's name servers, domains name server entries. And so
Okay.
if you're unsure how to do that, we'll help you through that process too. But that means that we would need to have your credentials, like at GoDaddy or wherever you're buying your domains.
But just to repeat so that we're clear, if I've been working on my website, let's say I've got a WordPress website, it's hosted over at, I don't know, my local internet company, like none of that stuff is going to change, right? Like I'm going to update my site the same way. It's still going to be hosted here. This is just adding another layer, correct?
That's correct. The only thing you want to be wary of is if you change themes on your website in WordPress or whatever, we need to be involved in that.
Yeah, there's certainly some asterisks of things. And the project that we're offering here after we do it, it also comes with an hour or two of time from one of our analysts to kind of walk through, hey, here's how we set it up. Here are the things with your specific site that you need to be aware of. If you change themes or if you add new categories or something, if there's certain kind of changes, you're going to want to do some tagging over here. But that's part of the training as well. When we kind of hand off the project to you and to your developers, it's, here are the things you should be aware of so that, with the majority of the stuff that you've been doing, it'll all be the same. But, if you ever decide to do new things or add new features or new things, that's just where you need to be aware that you might have to go into here and tweak a couple things in there to make sure that it works.
Right. If you're wholly redesigning the site, obviously our transformations need to change. So we'll have to turn them off temporarily until you're done, and then go in and kind of rewrite everything, do the transformations that are needed for that new design.
Does setting up that Cloudflare account, is there any type of sites that like can't do that first step? Is there any kind of sites where it's like we have a site that's our own custom thing and whatever, and Or to 99% of sites, yes, you can get a Cloudflare account. It's going to work just fine for you. What is?
I'd say a majority of the websites out there could easily just get onto Cloudflare and start this service. The kinds of sites that probably it wouldn't be appropriate for would be kind of either something like where they are their own registrar, like Google.com. They are their own registrar. They're not going to need Cloudflare.
But almost every site, no matter if it's like their own content management system, their own stuff they've developed, their own language, who knows, like there's
Yeah,
still that's still going to work, right? Moving it up to
yeah.
Cloudflare, no real reason to stop 99.9% of websites.
Well, there's also one other small category of sites where if you're using a competing service, and I'll name Fastly as probably a competitor to Cloudflare. If you're on Fastly and you're committed to it and you can't change from Fastly, then using Cloudflare, you might not want to switch over to Cloudflare. But other than that, yeah, I mean,
when you set it up, I think you mentioned earlier a Swiss Army knife is now available to you once it's up there. Can you, once you set up someone's account, how are you using that Swiss Army knife? What is that Swiss Army knife? What are things that it does? And how does it, again, affect the people that are updating the site over here?
A few years ago, Cloudflare innovated on their content delivery network servers with an instance of Google's V8 JavaScript engine, which allows them to run code on the edge servers, right? So this is pretty neat in that, and they've really optimized, that whole structure, which makes them pretty unique in the marketplace offering this capability. So once you're on Cloudflare, once I'm able to, or we are able to, access those, that access point, those workers by virtue of cloud workers. We have a JavaScript API which lets us transform the HTML and do things like find and replace operations. So we can pretty much change virtually anything. We can even change page headers going out.
So let me get this right though. I imagine that part of the project is going to be first getting a baseline of scores. Here's your page speed insights, here's your Lighthouse scores and all these different categories. Like, here's the baseline. We're like, all right, we're going to Cloudflare. And now that you've got access to this Swiss Army knife of tools, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're doing is you're kind of looking at things like the Google Lighthouse report and being like, hey, what are scores that aren't perfect? What are warnings? What are errors? And then you're kind of looking at your Swiss Army knife that you have now and be like, all right, can we add some alt text? Can we remove this? Can we add this? Things like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, and like in a basic sense, imagine alt text. So we can write a block of code that checks to see on any image tag if there is an alt attribute for that tag. And if there is none, we can simply add one, right? And that can be a conditional, so that if you go in and write alt text for a specific image that we're overwriting, or right now when it's missing, you add your own alt text, and the next time that cloud worker runs, since you've added your own custom alt text, our block no longer operates on that specific image. So there's some things that are kind of universal like that. And then there are others that are going to be highly specific, like writing or rewriting your canonical tag, for example. If we're going to change your robots.txt to include or just edit it completely.
But what you're going to do is kind of, once we have it up into Cloudflare and you're looking at the scores and you're looking at what are, the end goal that I think that everyone wants is to have 100 on every single score, right?
Yes.
100 in all these different areas. And so, once you have it up on Cloudflare, you're going to look at the scores again and be like, all right, now what are all the things now that can be improved? And a lot of those things are things that you can do yourself through using your Swiss Army knife. Hey, here's some scores are low. If this score is low, it means we should X, Y, and Z. We're just going to blah, blah, blah. And kind of you pull out that Swiss Army knife of magic and you do some magic, and it doesn't change anything on their server that they're doing stuff on. It just changes stuff up here, and suddenly, errors and warnings that were here are no longer there, and your page is faster now. And that's overall correct?
Yes, we
Okay.
even have a testing lab that, we can proxy your site using a different domain to show you a sample of what we can, kind of project as
So
your new.
let's talk about that for a moment. So kind of, oh, and let me just finalize another point. There's a lot of things that you can fix. There's some things you can't, and probably everyone knows this, especially if you're calling in third-party resources, where those third-party JavaScripts or things have to load on your page. Now, Detlef is certainly looking at things, like you want stuff first contextual paint or whatever, the stuff above the fold you want to load real quick. And so, he may delay some of that stuff, but some of the stuff too, in the end, when we're all done and we were talking to your programmers, it might be like, hey, here's a list of things that you're doing on your website that are slowing the site down. And maybe you need all those, maybe you need that chat program. Maybe you need that type of analytic program. There's going to be some of those you're going to be like, yes, we need these, and we understand it's slowing us down a little bit, but we need those. And then there's going to be some where you might be like, anyone use this? What is this? I don't remember putting it on. And it's like some of those things are like, all right, let's remove it and see what happens. But that's kind of on your end stuff. But
Yeah, and there's even some things I can change in the third party code. Like I was looking at Facebook events JavaScript, which binds to the window.unload event, which is dings your best practices score. And I was looking at, well, I'll probably tinker with and have a solution that actually just removes that unload event from that script. We could basically fetch that script and serve it directly, through
nice.
Now, so there are some things. I mean,
was there something you told me the other day, and I hope I'm right on this, but you know how whenever you run PageSpeed Insights or Lighthouse, they always show like one of the red errors or things that can be improved is the actual Google analytic code. And you're always like, why is Google showing their own code as errors in their tools? And did you tell me the other day that like you had some solution to that? Am I correct on that?
Well, their own code redirects. And so, I mean, there's something we could try to dive into that subject. Of course, we could take anything to the nth level. And what we need to do is really tackle the big stuff first. But at some point, when we get to transformations that might be transforming some third-party code, even that is potentially fixable. It's just, diving in and fixing some Google Analytics code. If they're always redirecting because it's just a spelling thing, then we can do that and eliminate that redirect by making the reference direct instead of making the reference to the old URL. So it just depends on what is happening and diving in and figuring out what is happening under the hood and seeing if it's fixable.
You had also mentioned that, in a sense, before you, not you, but the person watching the video, before you flip those DNS switches, there's a couple things, is that you can see it on like another URL, and you can you can see it. Hey, does it look the way that, it looks here? You also can check out the load time speed of that too. So you can be like, hey, if we go with kind of this version, which is up here and has these little Swiss Army knife things going to it, like these can be my scores. In fact, if I go through some of those third-party stuff and remove a few of those, I might even be able to get it a little bit higher. I've dealt with so many companies that have come to us and said, hey, can you help out with load time speed? And sure, there's reports people can run, and we've run reports for years as well. Google gives reports, and what happens is, we might look at that and even give some better suggestions. This is in the past, and maybe said, all right, Google really doesn't say how to solve this, but here's how to solve it, and here's some of the steps. But I think that normally when you would hand those to another programmer or designer, and like, here's a bunch of reports and suggestions of things that can make the speed faster of the site, what we found is that the programmers and designers look it over and say, well, we can do 2 of these things, and the rest of it, nothing we can do about. And it's like, that happens 99% of the time that we hand people reports. And it's like, but they're not knowing there's a whole other level that you can go to by using the cloud and by using the tools that are in there. Detlef, we just did, you did 2 sites this past week. Can you tell me the scores of, I don't know if we're looking at the home pages or sub pages, but I know we had some before and afters on just the 2 that we did this past week. Do you recall those scores offhand?
Yeah, one was the one that was really keying in on the score for Web Vitals. The other one was keying in on a score for just valid HTML, the W3 or .org validator. So in the case of the validator, we took code and it was our recommendation to produce valid code. And there was a lot of broken HTML in it. It wasn't the kind of broken HTML that you could just sort of live with. It was enough that we wanted to provide the fixes.
And that validator was causing load time issues. Like there were things in there that were causing site issues, including how Google was loading the pages. And it was a code issue, but a lot of the stuff has to be fixed, and also your speed, your usability, etc. are going to be fixed.
In that case, they did have some preload scripting in place, and so it was pretty fast. But the other side, we took their scores on average, I think it was 17 points up across the board. So we improved the scores by 17 on average. So some scores went from really low to 90s.
Yeah, I don't think they were that bad. Wasn't it? They weren't too bad. Were they like in the 70s or something? And then did you get, how many were hundreds? You were reading me off out of the 5 scores.
Yeah, well, I think I don't know if I think I got 100 on the SEO one, but I think the others were all high 90s, and so we took them from 70s to high 90s.
And this was a client who had bought a report from us in the past. They had gone to other companies. They had gone to different designers. They sent their designers to learn stuff, and they kind of said, this is the best that we can do. And he's like, that's not good enough, and came back to us. And that's where we realized there's if we take it to the other level of, let's get your site on the cloud, let's open it up to all of these other things that can make it's all those messages that when people click on the error messages and they're like, we can't do that, it's like all that stuff is in the cloud. Yeah, but you can't do it because you're not in the cloud.
Yeah. There are a lot of browser error messages in the console that can be cleared up. In fact, that'll ding you. If you've got, console messages that code is producing errors, that'll ding you in the scores. So, we're looking at everything, which is great. And what's really key here, what this service really opens up, is the ability to patch things. Meanwhile, you can get to the work of actually fixing it at the origin. So this can be a Band-Aid or a bridge to your better site. We can even offer this kind of service to people who want to migrate to a new design, to do it nicely and carefully and do the redirecting in chunks and stuff, and make sure it's indexed properly by Google, and just really control things, to try to avoid an abrupt disruption of your business. So, I mean, there are a lot of things that we can do to apply this service towards.
You actually said a really interesting thing on, let's say someone says, go ahead and do everything. And so we go ahead and do everything. And in the end, they're like, we don't want to flip the switch. We don't want to change the name servers for some reason. And it's like, that can be okay. In fact, you take everything that we did over here and you can see it all. Yeah. You can see all the scores, and Detlef can go through and be like, here's all the things that I fixed, so that, if you don't want to flip the switch, which will make things a little bit, if you're like, I don't want to change the switch, or you're like paranoid about it, like, okay, that's okay. We'll show you everything that we did over here that you need to do over here. And that's going to greatly increase your site speed.
Yeah, I'll put comments in the code so that developers can see, and it'll be their own code. So I'll be commenting in their own code and supplying the fix. And so they can look at the scores, or they can look at other tests like the validator, see that we're passing, and see the difference. And then they can look at those comments for clues as to what they should be doing at the origin. The origin being their own host. So you can fix it at your own host, and we're happy with that. All we're trying to do is be more effective than just submitting a report to you.
Reports are useless. If we can take it to the other level of, like, instead of a report, we're just going to go in and do all the work. Why hand your designers a report where they're going to be like, we fixed 2 things and the rest of it we can't do anything about? Like, no, we want to be friends with your designers. We want to be friends with your web developers. We want to be on the same team. We want to be like, hey, really great code you did there. That's awesome. Ideally, they're like, wow, we're learning some really cool stuff, and you guys are really cool. And
ultimately, if there wasn't a need here, we'd be happy with submitting reports, but there's a need. to get this stuff sort of the point across. And there's no better way to do that than to provide you the benefits, right, in the meantime. And it's critical now because we're ahead of Core Web Vitals, the page experience update in May. And when that actually takes place.
Well, they might be watching this afterwards. So I should say you might be a little bit late to the game, but better late than never.
Well, that's what I was about to get into, was be that, if you haven't taken advantage of fixing your site for page experience and for that update, now's the time. There's no time like the present, which, meaning that once that's in place, we're still providing the service to get you the better scores as quick as possible. If you can edit and change the code yourself after the fact, terrific. We're happy. We've done our work. We're in it for proving the web for you, your web experience right away, for your users as well, because these things are all intended to improve things for users in the end.
And just so it's clear as well for those that hire us, we're not the ones flipping the switch. So it's kind of like, we're just not going to do something and be like, all right, guys, we flipped the switch. Like, that's something you'll do on your end. You can have everyone test out everything, which is what you're going to want to do. Test out everything and then flip the switch and continue to test.
Yeah, you control your DNS. That's your domain ownership.
Yeah, we're not going to surprise people and be like, surprise, it's all done. I mean, it would be cool in many senses. Surprise, you're done. It's all through. But we'll have you look at stuff before, and you can do that final.
Well, the first things are going to be all the universal global code blocks that can do things like add alt text for images when they're not there. So you'll see improvements on something like that right away, because that's a code block that's universal. Then
things like that help with web accessibility standards as well. Like now we're getting into the laws. Are there more things besides alt text as well, that just out of curiosity, that you can do with your Swiss Army knife for web accessibility?
For sure. So one of the key things here is that people tend to develop websites and they create sort of a div and span soup. And so that they don't take advantage of semantic HTML containers, which are things that the screen readers that are used by people who are visually impaired, how they navigate the internet, going through your headings and stuff and properly coding them all in descending order, including sort of a main container that has your content, and then a skip to content link is the first thing that should be on the page, because a screen reader would otherwise have to read navigation.
Are these things that when you go into their Cloudflare account, you're going to kind of pull up your Swiss Army knife and be like, hey, here's some things that need to be better, and flip those switches, so to speak?
Yeah, we can implement those things. So when we see that they're missing, then we can add them to your site. We can do all kinds of additions as well to the site.
Let's talk a little bit too about what our service is and what our service isn't. And just to be clear, we're not looking to be anyone's website designer. We're not looking to be that company that you call when you're like, I need to change something on my web design. That's not us. We're going to be doing a specific project where we're going to get you all set up, and we're going to optimize the heck out of you, and we're going to have 1 or 2 hour talk where you're going to talk with Detlef or one of the other members of our team, and we're going to go over everything that we did and what are the things you need to be aware of, and that's that. Like you guys got it from there. And Detlef, the time that we would spend with their team and their designers, like it's not like we're going to leave them. They're going to be like, we have no idea what's going on. Or like, this is stuff they're all pretty much going to get. Like, there's really not a whole lot of changes really going on. Correct?
Yeah. We're going to try and do this in tandem with you to make sure anything and everything that is implemented is done on a schedule that is not going to be abrupt and sudden. You might not even notice if we're just adding alt text to all the images at once. So you're going to be able to benefit by it without even any visual changes at all. And anything that's going to change anything visually is something we're going to want to do in tandem with you to make sure you're comfortable with it.
And practically every one of those things is going to increase your Google Lighthouse scores, correct?
The things that we're working on.
Practically everything, not everything, but practically everything.
Yeah, and Google. So the Core Web Vitals is sort of distinct from only the Lighthouse stuff, but the Lighthouse stuff is a lot of those metrics are part of what influences Core Web Vitals. Core Web Vitals is sort of a summary of a lot of data underneath. And so we're going to be targeting those things that improve those Core Web Vitals scores in the chase to try to get you 100% across the board. We're aiming high.
All
We're going to
right.
at least try to get you in the green 90s plus on everything. So
that would be absolutely incredible, because I mean, like I said, most companies come to us and they're like, this is as high as we can get. And it's like, I know it's not. Okay, Detlef, let's talk about some questions that people might have, because they probably have lots of questions. So let's just start out with, what are Core Web Vitals and the page experience update? What is that, and why as web owners should they care?
Good question. Why should they care? Well, if you care about Google rankings, this is one factor of many, and not necessarily a main factor, but it does influence your rankings in more than one ways, actually, because they do have the page experience update coming in May, which means if you get good scores in these tests, then you can expect at least a little bit of a rankings lift. But also there's some correlation I've seen in data that shows that when you have good page experience, you tend to get more traffic. So sites that have this automatically get more traffic. More traffic tends to lead to more third-party links. It tends to lead to more rankings. So actually you can still expect sort of byproduct of better rankings. So if you're interested in your site becoming popular, you should be interested in these things, because they address user concerns primarily around performance. So you can expect that, a faster website pleases more users, more people. You want a snappy website that appears on screen. There's a few things that Google has begun sort of inventing, like this thing they call cumulative layout shift. And a cumulative layout shift means how much in total does your web page shift around before it finally settles in a stable state where you can click things. Because if you try to click something and then it suddenly disappears because an advertisement gets inserted above, you have a frustrating experience, and you might actually click the ad by mistake. I can attest that I've actually done that by mistake. Clicked on ads because I thought it was a button, and then it gets replaced by an ad by the time my finger hits the screen.
Those are good affiliates.
Yeah, in another marketing venture, maybe that's, but not in this one. So that's considered bad user experience, and Google is measuring that. They're basically measuring by looking at the elements that are on the page and literally measuring the pixels, how much they shift before the page settles. And that shift around in the viewport, which is the device window, if you deliver something on screen, splat, and it's there and it's stable and doesn't shift around, that's like 0 cumulative shift. If you display something on screen,
and doesn't Google care more about what loads first, like above the screen? Like,
yes, this whole thing is determinant on what's in the viewport, which is something that they can measure. So that means everything above the fold, and they measure it differently if it's mobile, because tends to be mobile design versus desktop design. So there's different measures based on your device type. But the thing is that everything above the fold is something that they want to see appear on screen as quickly as possible and without any shift, as little shifting as possible. Now, if you have a web font, for example, changing the font can make some shift. You've probably loaded like a news web page and seen the headline suddenly change font right before your eyes, right after you load it. That's considered a cumulative shift. So you can actually, they actually measure that. And so in that case, that is something that we can help with by preloading that font.
how many sites, the percentage of the sites do you think get this wrong? If you're to pull a number out of the air, what a percent of the sites do you think get that part wrong?
I just don't see very many. 99%. I just don't see
Yeah.
to get everything right. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's not to say that I'm always right either. We're all capable of making mistakes. But the thing is that virtually every site screws it up, even if you start.
And we can fix this? Are you saying that, like, we can help this? We can make it better through our service?
Yes, we can make it better. Now, there may be some widgets that you want to employ on your website that make our job impossible to get to 100, but our goal is to get 90 plus on everything. So,
and that's like everything to show up above the fold as quick as possible.
As quick as possible.
99.9% of websites do not get that.
No.
And it's like, you want to get ahead of your competitors. Chances are 99% of your competitors aren't doing this. And you can have the advantages by hiring us. And one of the benefits, just one, like we'll give you an advantage over your competitors.
There are very few
Higher
sites.
scores on top of that.
Yeah, there are very
And
few
lose
sites.
less viewers on top of that and make more sales. That alone.
It's an understandable quandary for a web developer to engage with a framework that gets 100 scores across the board. Next.js is a framework for React, and it just released a starter template that if you look at it, gets 100 scores across the board. But
can we use that?
Every time someone uses this framework, they start adding and creating their website, the scores just start going down, 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 down.
So we don't want to use that.
And well, we do, but we want
to use that.
We want to try to retain those scores as much as possible.
When you talk about maintaining scores, that's an interesting thing, because I don't think we've talked about the monthly recurring work as well. It's not just, you know, I know I told everyone we're not your designers earlier, and, you know, we kind of want to do the project and give a couple hours of consulting and then kind of be done with it. But it's not really being done with it, because every single month, you know, there's renewal fees, there's new things going on where you're going in and editing the Swiss Army knife to kind of benefit everyone. Is that correct?
Right. There's improvements to be made in every block of code. I'm going to be refactoring things to add capabilities. If there are any bugs, I'm going to squash the bugs. And so those types of things are things that are going to be in constant upgrade, like any software upgrade cycle. So I'm going to want to go back and change code that has been refactored to improve things. You know, the alt text block might not act on an image that has an empty alt text attribute, where it's just a pair of quotes and there's nothing inside. Well, I want to make for that condition and write text in there, because you want to have some text in there. It should be something that's legible.
So basically, once we have this set up and someone is ideally flip their DNS, and now we're kind of working in the cloud and working with our Swiss Army knife of tools, it's kind of like there's really no stopping to the optimization, correct? It's kind of like we're going in all the time and improving the Swiss Army knife to help everyone out. And as you do more things to your site, you know, your scores are probably going to start going down. So one of the neat things is we're constantly kind of looking at everything and being like, all right, what are things that need to be fixed? What are things that are changing both within the website, within Google, within the industry, within everything, and kind of adjusting to that on a monthly basis. Is that correct?
Absolutely. If anything changes, and I do know that Google has some new metrics that they are going to roll out within a couple of years. So there's going to be new things in Core Web Vitals. So it's not going to stop, and we're not going to stop. So for as long as those things are out there, with us having the ability with our Swiss Army knife to edit, you know, and add SEO on the fly for you, those kinds of things are things that we can take action on quickly, even if you're fixing everything at the origin server, right? Yeah. Because if you're fixing everything and we're using this instead of a report, we're fixing it for you on the fly. And then once you've got the fix in place, we remove the worker. Even if we're engaging like that, it's great to benefit by the fix before you actually have it in place, right?
Yeah. And you know, I guess another thing is people don't need to have the recurring with us. There's certainly a lot of benefits, because if say you're just getting the service and you're not doing the recurring, well, you have to pay for your own Cloudflare account as well. That's going to be part of something you're going to need to do anyways. But I guess the other part is your site will probably slowly, you know, go down in numbers and go down in speeds. The more things that you add to the site, the more that the industry changes, the more that things changes. So you always can kind of do the service. We do all that we can. We give you the 1 or 2 hours of training as well. And, you know, and then it's all right, you guys got it from here. But it would probably be a large benefit to be like, you know, let's pay every single month to make sure that, you know, our speed is always as fast as it can be. And as we add things, and as the industry changes, and as Google changes, and as new technology comes along, that, you know, you're working with a team who's on top of this. And, you know, when all that stuff happens, we're going to be applying that to, you know, the people that are paying us the recurring fees as well.
Right. You know, even the one and done, you'll benefit by some, you know, of the code that we refactor, but you're not getting the active monitoring that would come with a, you know, an ongoing service level agreement, so that we would be monitoring everything and making sure things aren't broken or whatever.
How does a website check to see if they're optimized for core web vitals?
Well, there's a Page Speed Insights Google report. Another way to engage it is to use the Chrome browser and open up DevTools. So you do need to install web developer add-ons for Google to get DevTools, but DevTools should be readily available to you. You open up the DevTools, and on the tabs, you should have one for Lighthouse scores. Again,
Yeah, there's a browser extension as well that if you download the browser extension through Google, you can just, any page you're on, you just click on the picture of the lighthouse and takes a minute and there's your scores as well.
Yeah, and ideally what we have is we have access to your Google page, your Google Search Console account, so that we can see the pages that are failing most and attack the problem head on. So that's kind of another level where we can get involved in order to help improve your site by seeing the data there.
So if you want to see if you're optimized, there's kind of, I guess there'd be two main tools, right? If you search for Google Page Speed Insights, I forget the exact URL, but you can put in your URL, you'll come to a page, there'll be a box, you put in your URL, click enter. It gives you a couple scores, and I guess, there's a desktop and a mobile, and you're going to want to, look at the mobile, and it'll give you trying to think, it's changed a few times. Does it give you just the one score or a couple of scores now? It used to be just like one score. You're like a 72. I think they've broken it down into a couple of other levels like Lighthouse now. You'll see, I think, different little scores. Usually the one that 95% of the times we see are the lowest are the performance. Those are that's a lot of the stuff that, our service is going to help. If your scores are low and if your scores say slow or they're low scores or they're red or I don't know, they're below 70 maybe, I'd take a hard look at it. But, you can look at your competitors as well. If your competitor is faster than yours and has better scores, then yeah, Google is going to like your competitor a little bit better in that area. And so if your scores were really fast, guess what? In that area of Google's algorithm, they're really going to like you.
And there may be other things that you're not scoring well on. If you're really fast, you still might be scoring poorly on SEO or accessibility or best practices. There are security things in the best practices one that we address as well. The rel equals no opener is an example of one where we can fix it on page, but we also have page headers that we can change for security, to putting a security directive in there.
Well, actually, speaking of that, what about SSL certificates in this process?
Yeah, good question. So Cloudflare is one of those services that they naturally just decided to offer SSL for everybody. So if you become a Cloudflare customer, your website automatically has an SSL certificate. It's a Cloudflare supplied one. There is a way to customize the certificate. In other words, upload your own cert to Cloudflare, but that requires enterprise level service with them, and the fees are higher, $200 a month higher. So, but for free, if nothing else, if your website doesn't have SSL right now, and you're giving your clients HTTP and not HTTPS site addresses, one thing you can do is get on Cloudflare and automatically improve your security, because they'll just give you SSL right off the bat. So there's another, simple benefit that just comes by virtue of getting on this platform.
Do you think the rankings might increase if you're with this optimization that we're doing here? Do you think it'll help rankings?
Well, we can at least refer to Google's own statement that there is an update that is going to take into consideration Core Web Vitals in the ranking process. So it's already implied that if we improve Core Web Vitals, that you'll see a rankings boost. It's just that we don't think, and I think they're also saying, you can't expect to go from position 1,000 to position top 10. It's just not it's a little boost, but
right. And I think even now though that load time is part of the ranking algorithm now. Yeah. So yeah. This is more like a refinement on load time, so to speak.
Well, the current ranking, the factors that take into consideration performance is going to be replaced by Core Web Vitals, because performance is part of Core Web Vitals measurements.
Is there possible to like install some plugin to help do this?
Some plugins do, boost a few scores, but they're pretty limited and they're kind of, they're not going to work in all CMSs. Like WordPress might have some, page speed boosters and stuff that do some things, but you're always going to want a custom solution of some kind. And that's where plugins, kind of fall short because they're trying to please a lot of websites. And what we're doing with this service, really for, probably, without becoming your developer at all, we're probably pretty early or one of the first people to manually go in and do these things for your site individually, as opposed to using a software that uploads workers or whatever. We're actually looking at your site and making some specific fixes on your behalf in the workers themselves. And that's what we're offering.
Is there any other company you've heard of that offers a service like this?
Like this exactly, not that I'm aware of. There are some other companies that offer Cloudflare workers-based services, which do include things that can optimize your site if you do the work and upload, say, an Excel spreadsheet for the changes that they will automate into your workers for you, but nothing that is like, we'll go ahead and modify your code on the fly.
What if you're like, my scores are better than my competitors? Should you still care about this stuff? And if so, why?
Well, again, performance is one measure. If you score low on any of the others, you should want to be better in those areas. But if you're 100% across the whole board, then yeah, you should.
Well, what if you're 75 across the board, but all your competitors are 50?
That's
Should
room.
you be like, you know what? I'm better than them. That's good enough.
That's room for improvement. The way that Google sort of grades this is anything below 50 is a failing grade. Anything below 90 is a needs improvement grade. And anything above 90 is, right on.
Okay. If you have all your scores above 90, does that mean there's a good chance your site just got a little faster?
If you're above 90, it means you have things in place that make your sites faster than if it were lower. So if you went from 70 to 90, your site will be faster. So you can actually experience this,
So if you went from 75 to 90, you're probably going to be losing a lot less visitors.
Yes.
For people
yes.
that are waiting for your site to load, where there's been a lot of stats on how many visitors you lose every second something needs to wait to load. And if you're, competing against, I don't know, Amazon, you better load pretty fast.
Yeah.
Your pages are on the cloud too. And,
the coolest thing of this service is that all of these things just improve things for users. That's why Google thinks it's important, and that's why you should think it's important.
And thus you're going to have more sales. Like if you're at 75, I kind of wouldn't be like, well, I'm better than all my competitors. I'd be like, darn it, I'm still losing sales. Like, how can I get more? I want my site as fast as possible. I want those scores to be as high as possible, because the goal of all that is to make your site fast and to provide the best user experience.
Yes.
That's why all the scores, that's what Google's doing. And so it's like, I wouldn't, I kind of said earlier, what is the score? And I wanted to backtrack on that, because it's not just, I'm better than my competitors, so, hey, I'm okay. Like if you're not above 90 across the board, you're losing sales.
Yes.
You're losing sales. And that's where people don't realize it. And that's where it drives me nuts when they hand a report to their designers and their designers say, we can fix number 7 and number 16 and the rest of it, there's nothing we can do. We were like, okay, I guess we'll have to stick with our 75 score. And it's like, you don't have to.
Right. And in some cases, the designer who can't fix something at the origin may be using some kind of a platform. I was looking at a platform the other day where I was actually given credentials to go in and fix some things. And one of the things was trying to add an alt text to the logo, which is on every page, right? So there's at least one alt text missing on an image of every page. So I go in and I look for the logo where it's uploaded through this e-commerce platform. And you can't add alt text to the logo image. And there's no other way to actually edit that code because everything is server end. You're not in control. It's an e-commerce platform. So how do I fix that? Well, cloud worker, no problem. Got that covered. So we can change things that your designers actually can't do themselves. So
No,
there's an example of something that we can help improve a score where, in some
well,
e-commerce platforms, it's
let's
just a
talk a
pop.
little bit about images, because this brings up another beautiful point, because probably one of the biggest things that I've seen when I look at people's scores, one of the biggest culprits, I don't know, 80% of the time is your images. And there's two things with the images, and most people are doing both wrong. And the first one is, if we look at the original source size of your images, and then the size that you display them in mobile and in desktop, we often find that, designers grab that great big image and they compress, to show it this size on the page. And yet the whole image has to load. And
Yeah.
it's like no one catches why, and so images are often one of the biggest hogs. And so
Oh, yeah.
there's the one where people, they take the image and scale it down, or there's just the images that, aren't optimized. They're huge in size, not length and width, but billions of pixels or whatever. And it's like, again, that you can optimize those images. Almost all the sites we work with, almost all of them have those two issues somewhere going on.
Yeah.
Can our system, can Cloudflare and your Swiss Army knife of tools, can it fix that kind of stuff? And if so, how can it fix that kind of stuff?
There are a lot of things in that, I'll unpack that a little. There are a lot of ways to fix images depending on what problem you face. You have to tackle it one way or another. If you have an image that's uncompressed, and that addresses the issue where you've got an image that might be small but has so many pixels it's still a huge image file size, that's uncompressed. And there are a lot of compression algorithms that can be used to optimize that. And obviously we're looking at things like being able to optimize that on the fly for you too. We're working on that. And the other thing that's more obvious is someone who has an image that's like 1,000 pixels, but yet the image on the page is only used 100 pixels wide or something. So that's a factor of 10 right there, right? So again, we're looking at things where we might be able to modify that image for you to make it the right size. But more importantly, even if that download is still required of a bigger image, one of the things that's easy to implement that improves things right on the fly is to add the width attribute of the width that's actually there on the image tag. So you're adding the width and height there because that allows the browser to carve out the space for that image and place it so that you're improving the cumulative layout shift Core Web Vital right there. And so there are some things that you can do to improve, even if we're not engaging some of the more complex image compression and modification kinds of plans that we have. When we have that need, we'll pull it out.
Can you tell me, does this service include any JavaScript coding?
Well, not for the client. It's mainly for me. There are other languages, by the way, that are supported, but JavaScript being the primary one, we're going to stick with it. Yeah, not the entire JavaScript language is available through because obviously the code is running at the edge. There's some security reasons why they don't do eval statements, for example, which can be a serious problem if if there was a worker that was doing bad things. So there's a lot of security restrictions in the worker, and including there's ways to run it so that if there's an error in the JavaScript, everything else runs as normally, so that it prevents disruption of the page or disruption of the site. So there's a lot of safeguards in this. But yeah, we'll be doing we'll be doing the JavaScript, we'll be doing the transformations using JavaScript. Now, the reason that language is important is that it has access to the DOM. So we can run all kinds of things, but in their transformations, we're not really doing that, but we can write code that in the client does that. So there's a lot that we can, we really can do practically anything. Because the JavaScript language gives us that ability.
With anything that you're doing, are you going to be changing anyone's style sheets or web design?
Well, I wouldn't want to change their design, but as part of the service to improve speed, there may be a time where we're required to do some code splitting. And if we're going to do that, even though that's sort of an advanced thing and it might take a little more time and a little bit more of the level of the service, by doing that, that might be the remedy for performance. And that means that because CSS style sheets. CSS is a render blocking resource, which means that as the CSS first has to download, that's render blocking just simply by the fact that it's taking up that bandwidth. But it's render blocking in that it has to apply when those styles have to get applied. That's render blocking. So that means that CSS is pretty critical to the page speed performance score. So what we want to do is, if you download CSS for the whole website on the first hit, and all we need is the CSS for above the fold, we're going to want to defer that download, and we're going to want to put the CSS in line that styles that above fold content, so that that's ready to go even after the style sheet loads later. But by deferring that, that gives us our initial page speed score that we want. And so that's basically where we might interface with a style sheet.
If my website runs on WordPress, can you still help? How about Magento, Shopify, Joomla, Drupal, WooCommerce, BigCommerce, my own custom CMS? Can you help with all those?
Practically all of them, yeah. The exception might be, and I do know that Shopify is one that already uses Cloudflare, but we have an issue where there might be a orange to orange cloud problem with Shopify, but I know that Cloudflare is working on that. So even if you're on a Shopify thing, we should be able to fix things. That might be, I wrote an article about it last year. Just need to check in with Cloudflare if you happen to be on Shopify to make sure that we can do that.
So if their site's on WordPress, it's no problem?
WordPress, no problem.
You're on Magento, no problem?
No problem.
Drupal?
Yeah, any CMS.
WooCommerce, BigCommerce. What about my own custom content management system?
That works too. Yeah. If you build your own, that's great. I'm happy to actually, I kind of, that speaks to my heart. I actually love it. If you build your own, because I do, use server-side includes, Apache server-side includes for my dynamic system of.
Why should I put my website on the cloud?
You get a boost in security in a couple of ways by going with Cloudflare, but you also get performance boost. So the number one thing for SEO is the performance boost. The number one thing from a security standpoint is Cloudflare has actually made a name for themselves by, in some famous cases, fixing when major brand name sites, Fortune-sized companies, were getting attacked by the DDoS problem, which is a distributed denial of service. Basically, in a nutshell, it's when somebody writes a robot that makes a billion requests at a time but doesn't serve the acknowledge packets saying, I got your stuff. And then the server just ends up spitting out.
So do you think if your site is on the cloud, it's more secure than probably where you have it now?
I would say that if you went with Cloudflare, 99 or higher percentage of the time, you're more secure than where you're hosted right now. Yes.
Cool. Now, is your site really on the cloud or is it on your host?
Well, your site is served by your host. Your cached copies of your pages are hosted in the cloud on your behalf.
Want people to know, I don't want people to confuse it thinking like their whole site's moving up to the cloud. It's like, no, you're still going to be working on the servers just as you've been doing all the time. Like you're not doing anything different. You're updating the site just as you would update it. The cloud kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of like grabs copies of stuff and kind of stores it up there. So when people call for it, it shoots it over quickly. But if you make changes here, kind of this site kind of picks up on those changes and does it there, but you're only editing stuff pretty much here.
Yeah, Cloudflare basically periodically checks to see if when their cache expires, they're going to go fetch a new copy. And if it hasn't changed, they don't need to, they can just reinstate another timeline for that resource. So they're keeping copies, but you don't experience any delay. There are settings where you can limit the number of times Cloudflare goes to your origin and just serve directly. But on a static site, you might want to do that. And on a static site, you might want to just host in Cloudflare and have no host other than Cloudflare. That's all possible.
Interesting. What if someone's site is already up on Cloudflare or AWS? Should they be like, well, we don't need this because we're already there?
Well, if you want the transformations, then you want us to have access to that account so that we can put workers in place to transform your site so that, it.
So that's kind of part of it. You need it there, but then if you're not doing all the other things to optimize it, you're only going to get that initial boost from being there. There's
Yeah,
still tons of other things that probably need to be done.
our service basically takes advantage of this one feature of Cloudflare that allows you to transform your HTML on the fly. And you can do it yourself, but we're becoming specialists, specialists at it. So.
What is the actual deliverable that we're giving to people? What is that deliverable?
Well, since it's transformations on the fly, it's the code that does those transformations, which means it's JavaScript.
Do we own that code? If someone says like, hey, I want to leave, like, what would that involve? Like, let's say someone 6 months like down the line, they're like, you know what, we're going to do something else and we don't want to work with you guys anymore. Kind of, can you tell me what is involved in that?
Yeah, like if you own your site, so you can feel free to point it somewhere else at any time, or change your password to Cloudflare or whatever, so we don't no longer have access, or just change your DNS if you're doing it through one of our accounts, so that
so it's not like if you pull your site away, we're pulling all the code and we're going to slow you down. There's nothing like that at all, right? Like whatever benefit you got so far, like you got it all. You can take all the code, you can see all of the comments we put in. Like we're not like other people where it's like, you don't want to play with us, we're going to take away your toys and slow down your site and you can't have any of this. It's like,
very open.
You guys get everything, right?
We're very open. The transformations that we're making are readily available to you. If you move off of one of our accounts, we reserve the right to change the code for a different client. But but those transformations you should have gotten, from utilizing the service. And it's those transformations that you should take to heart. And if you don't want them, and if you want slower scores, you're welcome to the slower scores. The best way to take advantage of it would be to engage the service, look at the transformations, right? Make those changes yourself, and then disengage and say, I'm no longer interested in your monthly payment. Feel free to do that. But it's totally really.
And if you have guys that can every month keep up with all that and keep adding changes, or otherwise what I would assume would happen is like, all right, we got your score to these. Hey, great, go out for a drink, have your champagne. Chances are slowly over time, as you add things to your site, and as we're not updating to the new standards, your scores are going to go down.
That's the danger. The danger is if you disengage with us, you need someone like us on.
But at least you started it. At least you're going from a much higher level than without engaging us. So like, don't think that if you ever decide to leave that like there's any disadvantage. There's none. Like, great, right. We brought you to this level. The only disadvantage is slowly over time, you might go down because you don't have experts that are keeping up with this and editing things like each month to make sure that your scores are top notch. But like, that's the only negative really.
Every time someone builds something new into the website, they usually hack it in some way, and there's sometimes flaws, right? So, that's the danger, is that when you're doing that to your site, engaging with us, we might be able to catch that and fix things to keep your scores high, because that's what we're going to be monitoring is your scores. If your scores drop, we're going to have an alarm noticing something with that site. And so that's the kind of thing that we want to do, is to constantly monitor your site and your scores and your performance over time and make sure that it's held up. And obviously, things are going to change. So we want you to keep developing content. You want to keep adding content. And when you do so, our transformations shouldn't interrupt that or shouldn't get in the way, but we might want to modify them a little bit to the new content, or if you've added something that's entirely new, so that we want to, fix that up. So we want to notice that by having an alarm go off. Oh, something changed with this site. Let's go look and repair it as ASAP, or fix it up because you've added something or changed something.
Cool. I have another question that I'm tempted to answer it myself. I'm not the one that wrote these questions, but it says, we're a big company with lots of red tape. How will this affect the completion of the service? And my first thought is, if you're a big company with lots of red tape, like, we're small and nimble and move fast. And if you're going to be a big red tape where this is going to be months of approvals and things, like, I probably really don't even want to work with you. Like, I don't mean to sound rude, but it's like, I don't want to sit around and have this project drawn out for months. Like, are you kidding me?
Right.
Like, no, I really want people that are like, we're going to move fast. Like, we don't work with a lot of big companies because of that. We hand them stuff and they're like, we can't publish this without going through our legal department and through all these other departments. It's like, I don't have time for this. Like, but Detlef, I'll see if you're a little bit more kinder. That's kind of my initial thought. If you're a big company with red tape, I really don't want to work with you, honestly.
If you're a big company with red tape, use the industry news that Core Web Vitals are being measured for Google rankings and bring that to the higher ups that have decision-making power and get it done and cut through that red tape. If you can't, if it's because I've also worked for companies that have a lot of red tape and it takes a lot of approval and sometimes you get denied. This is a business where we can be effective, and we want to be effective with as many sites that we can, help them out. And if you're a big company and you're going to be getting into the red tape and dragging our feet through the mud on that with like we need all these agreements in place and stuff before engaging, that's more than we need to contend with because of our size. I guess that makes us kind of lucky, I guess.
Yeah. Let me bring up the next question here, and I might be able to answer this one too. A lot of it. What happens if the website speed doesn't improve after this? And I guess I can kind of be like, well, if it doesn't improve, then like, wow, I was about to say I'll eat my hat, but I'll be like, basically it's this. If you're not happy, I don't want people to be unhappy.
Yeah.
If you've paid for the service and you're like, hey, I'm not happy, it didn't deliver what I thought it would, or for any reason you're unhappy, like, just tell me, I'll give you your money back. Like, it's that simple. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to be like, we did this or that. I don't have time for that. Like, look, if you really don't like it, I'll give you 100% of your money back. I was going to say like, no questions. I'll probably be like, why? And I might be like, all right, you're nuts or whatever, but like, here's your money back. I'm not going to argue with you. Like, here's your money back. Let me bring up another question. So like, if we put it up on the cloud and you're like, okay, everything looks good, we love our new scores, and okay, we're going to change the DNS, and they change the DNS so that things are pointing up there and things are going on. And if something, let's say it's, I don't know, 2 months later and something breaks, I guess in those cases we want you to call, and we might be like, hey, you remember when we told you during that phone call that if you do X, Y, or Z, that you got to do something here, like you didn't do it. It's kind of that if you need those extra things on the side, there will be other fees for it. Our fees kind of are the setup, the couple hours showing everything we did to your guys, and ideally that's it. Like every month we're doing things to continue to make things really fast for you up here. If you're like, hey, we broke something or something went on, ideally your guys will know how to fix it. But if not, you contact us, there'd be a charge. We're not including things like that, but ideally we'll train you guys enough so that doesn't happen. But maybe you fire your designers and you bring on some new people and they're not aware, and they do, in any case, we can help.
Right. We're not the designers. And you still own your DNS, so you can point it wherever you want. So you control everything.
Yeah, worst case scenario too. It's like, you put it up and something breaks, you can just change your DNS to be like, point to my servers over here where things have been for years. And
yeah, if the crux of the problem comes up because someone changed something at the site and one of our workers was dependent on some piece of code for a find and replace option, and that breaks, chances are it won't ruin the site altogether, but the transformation won't happen. The score will go down, and hopefully we notice something like that. And then we figure out, oh, they modified the site or something like that. So what we can do is try to coach, remember not to modify your site, informing us. And what we can do is just switch off workers. So if you're actively designing or improving things, feel free. But again, that's one of those operations where, we turn off the workers, you redesign things, and we have to rewrite things to accommodate the new design. So it does entail more work. So as long as you're, in good standing with our invoicing and everything, and, it's part of the service basically, and it might take some time for us to get to that rewriting and things, depending on how busy things get. But
let's talk a little bit about testing things too. So,
yeah.
What about testing of things like the shopping carts and payment systems and things like that?
Yeah. So testing the production is different than testing and development. In development, we can do some things. We're literally developing the workers. We're not
And
developing
and
the site.
everything is in development first, correct? Like kind of
Well,
everything we're
yeah,
doing is over here,
we can,
and you can kind of see the scores and see everything.
right. And then those things, what those that are successful and easily global, move over to production. And so that's how that will work. And testing and production, meaning your shopping cart and everything else, everything should be exactly the same unless we're changing shopping cart code, and we're not going to do that. Unless there's an image in there that we want to add an alt tag to, which should not interrupt the ability for the shopping cart to function. So no functionality is literally being transformed. We're only transforming those things that have to do with this performance score and SEO kind of things.
But I wouldn't be like, we guarantee that nothing will go wrong. Um,
Things
it
break.
would
It
would you,
happens.
yeah. So would we suggest, like, flipping the switch late at night one night and, like, have their members of their team, like, basically trying to break everything to make sure that everything works fine, which it should.
Initially, the first thing you can expect is that nothing looks any different. Because you change the DNS, and once it propagates and it goes through Cloudflare, everything's the same, even the original scores on even the original performance scores. So it's after that period where we've got a successful Cloudflare integration, which is up to Cloudflare, but they've built the entire automated system for DNS, to make things work right out of the box. So that once you do that transfer, everything should continue to work as it did before. It's at that point when we have a successful integration, we start making it HTML transformations. And again, we have our own test bed. We're doing it by proxy. For successful blocks, we port over with global blocks that we know are generic and run, generically across every client. So we have those which will automatic, like the alt text rewriter. So stuff like that. And so it's like those things are global in scope. They are battle tested across all clients. They make the transformations that we require, which is to add alt text. And then there are the custom ones that we want to do for on a site by site basis. That's what you're really paying for, is you're paying for us to analyze your code like a tech SEO audit. And instead of delivering the audit, we're actually transforming your HTML using this service.
All right. I have another question that I'm not even sure what it means, but you probably do. It says, how are we handling PCI-DSS compliance for e-commerce sites?
PCI has to do with the regulations and safeguards that need to be in place for any organization that is storing credit cards and information, personally identifying information along with credit card numbers. So since neither Cloudflare nor Ninjas are storing any credit cards, we're not specifically we don't specifically need to be in compliancy. But you may have to if you're storing credit cards, that is. You may not be storing credit cards. If you use something like, authorized.net for your card processor, you may not be storing any credit cards because authorized.net is actually storing all your credit cards. So but if you require PCI compliance, Cloudflare has a recipe for configuration settings to allow the site to continue to pass the PCI compliancy scans, so that you are in effect PCI compliant through this service. And that's
Gotcha. My next question is, what a level Cloudflare service is being used, and who's maintaining the billing and access to the accounts? Now, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but if someone's getting the monthly plan with us, we're taking care of all that. That's like included in your monthly fees. If you're, well, I guess I'll let you explain that. So what is the Cloudflare level of service being used? And I guess if you're paying the monthly, we're doing the billing. They would still have access to the accounts, correct? Like, we're going to hand them, here's your login and password.
we could, if that's something you require. Otherwise, it depends on if you want a hands-on or a hands-off, relationship. If you want access to the Cloudflare, basically you could set it up yourself and give us the access. So it could be a role reversal there, no problem. all we need is access to the workers service, which starts at $5 a month, and I think you get the first something like 100,000 worker interactions, which translates to like hits. Like the first 100,000 hits for free at $5, and then just goes up incrementally by fractions of pennies. So it's a small fee. That's the minimum required account level at Cloudflare. They also have pro level and enterprise level, and then a custom level, right? And I don't think I've seen yet the need for anything to be above enterprise level. Enterprise level buys you the ability to upload your own custom certification, your secure certificate. So you can upload your own cert and have your cert being presented to all browsers. That requires an enterprise level account, and that's an additional $200 a month. The pro level, I think, is $20 a month, and that would be if you've got a complex site that has lots of workers. We recommend that, and each additional worker is an extra $5. So we might have lots of workers running on your behalf, and if so, then those fees tally in. But it's basically those things can be also covered by monthly cost if you just want to not care about it and just pay the monthly installment to continue to enjoy the benefit of the service, and just have us take care of everything like that because you just want a hands-off approach. So your level of engagement is really up to you in this, because we're acting as your SEO agent, and and we can be either full service or sort of a self-serve situation where we go in and add your workers for you on an account that you set up with Cloudflare.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Is this the most exciting thing you've ever worked on before? I got to ask.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When I got back into doing a lot of SEO stuff, the first thing that I looked around and, I was wondering where's the innovation? And I came across this Cloudflare workers issue, and I wrote a post about it a couple of years ago. And I'm just like, this is the coolest thing I have seen since the old days. Being able to edit SEO on the fly. I mean, we can really do virtually anything that an SEO report would have. We can actually edit the code and make it happen on a client's website. So it's not just reports. We're out of the reports game. We're in a game now where we can actually do these transformations for you for as long as you haven't made them at your origin. And then when you've fixed up your site, we can withdraw those transformations because they're being done at the origin. There's no longer any need for those. Maybe there's some others that we come across that improve things in another area. So it's just getting in the mix of a longer dialogue with clients to improve the site across the board in areas that the developer may or may not be able to do anything about. And being able to make those transformations is amazing. That being able to change page headers is not something most developers know how to do, and we can actually do that on the fly. So we can add security headers. We can add the rel equals no opener. We can add the no opener security directive in the page header and make that point moot. So we can add page headers, and that's not something that every web developer knows how to even approach. So
you've been in this industry for, I don't know, more than 25 years, and you know all the big players. I know all the big players.
Oh yeah.
Is there anyone alive out there that knows more about this than you, that you're aware of? Because I don't know anyone more aware of this than you. Do you know of anyone that Bob knows more than me about this?
Well, I mean, I know enough about web development that I'm pretty great at being, and also not just front end but back end development too. So having done it for that long, I'm up to my neck in old school knowledge, and I get to stand on that where a lot of new young designers and coders, don't have the experience. At the same time, they're pretty flashy coders, so I don't want to say I'm better than everybody, but I do want to say that.
But as far as core web vitals and fixing sites to get better scores, do you know of anyone better than you out there that you're like, Bob could do a better job than I could? Anyone you know out there?
The good news is that we all have to contend with the same things, and so we all know.
I know you're not giving me the answer that I want. I don't know of anyone out there.
Well, I don't know anyone.
Detlef on this topic, which is so important. You can find 1 million people that give you reports. Oh, any company will be happy to spit you out a page speed insight report and add their own little twist to it. But it's who can actually go in and do the stuff? Who? oh, this
There
guy,
are
I don't know where
people-
he is on your screen, but like, this guy right here can, and I don't know anyone else in the world that can do it.
because there are some people who know a lot about Core Web Vitals and how to fix things, and I think it's great. There's a handful, but they're probably working with the developers like I would be doing before this, and trying to get them to change the origin site. And so that's a long drawn out process that doesn't always result in the everything being executed the way you want. And so this kind of as far as I'm aware, we're the only ones doing SEO transformations on the fly. And I'm sure people will follow, but then we'll be that much further ahead. So it's how it is.
There we go. On the fly.
On the fly.
On the fly. If you're watching this video and you're like, I should hire this guy and this team, they seem to know what they're doing. Like somewhere on there, whatever page you're on, contact Internet Marketing Ninjas. Say that, you want your site faster, you're worried about the core web vitals, you watched a video, say anything, Chris will get back to you. So Chris has been with me, like 11, 12 years. They'll be able to talk to you, get things set up. We got all hands on deck. We're planning on doing a lot of these over the next several months. So, we have Detlef, we've got Drew, we've got Ann, we got John, we got Jason, we got Adam. Like, you got a whole team here, all of us going in and hammering this thing over the course of days, like, maybe a week, 2 at the most, and like have this done for you, so that we can move on and do more of these. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm excited. Contact Ninjas. Somewhere around here, there's a button. Click on it. Contact us. Say, I want my site faster. I hope you found this geekiness fun to watch. I know I found it fun to participate in.
Great fun.
And we'd love to help you out. If you need the service, we're here for you.
Yeah.
All right. Rock and roll.